Nice job. But can you talk about language and how you approached? I don't know if you speak, if you're fluent, but I saw translators, so I'm assuming you're not. So how you kind of approached the script and dealt with all that?
Well, I guess those are, I mean, the way we approach the script, for instance, is sort of tied into like my whole philosophy approaching this from even the very beginning, like when we were doing documentaries through this, which was, the language is performed in Pular for the most part, which I don't speak. It's not really a written language. I speak French though, so we would like have group discussions in French, and some actors didn't speak French, but we had translators there, and they would perform in Pular, which I couldn't understand. But then the translator would tell me, like after each take, if we hit certain moments, because the script was like it was like a treatment with bullet points for things that needed to be said in each scene. But and so I had to trust that they said what we needed them to say, and then in New York, translated everything. So it was like I didn't know if we really had a film until we were back in America getting it translated to English. But Pular is what they speak in the village, but 50 feet outside the village they won't speak it, and dialects change from region to region. So this is the first like international film that you can see like outside of West Africa that's in this language. And I mean pretty much like when I first went there, when I was still in college, and I had done a lot of research on it. It was for this educational group, and I'd done a lot of research on like what are the films people are making, documentaries in rural schools. And it was all, I found pretty much across the board, this like tear-jerking pity material that you feel sorry for the people on screen for various reasons. This is what the media that was available to us was. So when I went there, I wanted to try, just as a documentary filmmaker, to remove myself as much as possible and like let the students dictate the story of the documentaries that we do. So then for this, it was really important that we were developing the story to let it happen in their own language, in their own way of telling stories. So it's like very fable-like, because that's how it made sense to them.
I loved your use of music in it. That's great. I'm wondering about the relationship between the actors, if they are actors, and are they family members? Did they know each other?
So none of them had really acted before or seen like movie cameras or anything. They all knew each other, but never performed before. But like the two sisters were real sisters. They actually are the first in their family to ever go to school. But they're not, for instance, the brother isn't their real brother, but he lives like a couple, like 20 yards away. So it was very close to maybe what their real relationships were.
I love the film too. I was wondering what brought you to Senegal originally in college. What was your interest in it? And what were you studying that made you want to go there and meet people?
So I was studying theater and film. Like I was making films in high school. Knew I wanted to do film and was interested in narrative film specifically. Then I had an opportunity through like a personal connection, pretty much during an off semester, to go to Senegal for 2 weeks to this school and make a video for a nonprofit group, like for their use. So I was, yeah, of course, that sounds great. And that's when I did all this research to see what people were making. And I was just really interested in the fact that I never really felt connected like as an equal to the people I was seeing on screen. I just felt sorry for them. So I went into it like just thinking I'm going to try this new exercise of like shooting the film for the group, but also in a way that seemed to present an alternative to what I'd seen. And then when I was there, I met this group of kids who I was 19 at the time, and they were 16 or 17. And like the main actress is one of those kids, the boy Amadou. And they were the very first kids from this village to ever go to school. So that was really interesting to me, because I'm interested in coming of age stories generally, stories about fitting in. And so as as we got to know each other, just this incredible thing they were going through, being the very first. Before that, no one had ever even thought of going to school. It wasn't in the cards. So that they were the very first. So then, you know, you might notice that Kumba, the older sister, has a tattoo on her face. That's what that color is, but her younger sister doesn't. And that's because once these first kids started going to school, they realized the tattoo made it hard to fit in once they went to middle school, which is in the city. So they stopped doing the tattoo. But there's some kids who are right at that intersection when they're living really in the old world. So anyway, that was really interesting to me. So even though I wasn't a documentary filmmaker, I didn't consider myself that. I just felt very compelled to go back. So I then went back the following year and we did a larger documentary project. And through the course of doing that, I learned about this early marriage issue. It's a major human rights issue, but I had no idea really. But what I found is that everything, all the friction between the modern and the old world seemed to boil down to early marriage. That was the snapping point. So that's where we decided, I thought I'm going to do a fiction film, which I really, really wanted to do. That would be the story, because, if it were something else, if it were some other issue that was the breaking point, that's what the film would have been about. But it was about really early marriage was the crux of it. So that's how that all happened.
I want to ask the pair of you, how was it in co-writing something like this? How did you process that together?
So I guess we started with a bunch of real stories that we had from the documentary, which I had sort of mapped out, and then we together picked things from those real stories, and would also have the students on Skype every so often to form that into a plot. And then Alexi was really helpful with certain parts of that.
Yeah, I think what interested both of us at first was the idea that there wasn't really a wrong or right character or perspective in it, that we could really identify with the tradition and also the desire to break from tradition. And so I think I guess as far as collaborating, that didn't really answer that question. But that's what interested us. And then as far as Jeremy and I working together, I think we have different styles and different things we like to focus on. My personal interest was more with the relationships between the sisters and the different characters, and so I think that was where I found access into their stories, even though I was never able to go to Senegal myself.
If they had followed through on the teacher's advice about going to the police, what would have happened? That's the first part. And the second part is, do chiefs really have that much influence over what happens in villages like this today?
That's the real village elder. And yes, they definitely do. And if they had gone through to the police, there are cases where that's happened, and the police might arrest the parents, which would be a big disaster for the whole village. So it just never. Sometimes the school will threaten to involve the police, and that's enough to at least to put some muscle behind forcing a village elder to cancel a marriage. But generally, they would never actually report to the police. But what could happen in theory would be that an arrest could be made.
Just related to that, there was a line in there that the mother was saying to the older daughter, don't change your culture, understand your culture. How is that culture in marriage particularly?
Yeah, and that line, I think again comes from the school of thought that I had going into this, which was I wanted to be as totally objective and invisible as the directorial voice as possible, and just let every perspective come through. So what that means is, before school was built, which was in the year 2000, it wasn't a question of do you get married or do you not? You just did. It wasn't even thought it was early marriage, it was just marriage. So it's only when school came in that it became like a big problem. And of course now like all the younger generations like, don't marry us off, but let us stay in school. And objectively you could say clearly like so much healthier for not only the individual girls of course, but for the society as a whole to send your kids to school instead of marrying them off. However, from the parents' perspective, it's this new thing. It's not really a sure bet, like remembering that the very first generation, like batch of kids they ever sent to school who are in their early 20s now are just finishing high school and just starting to get jobs. They haven't even seen like the proof of school being something that they should even consider. So that's where that comes from. And I think like the point of the film, once I realized we were making a film about early marriage, which is I know is this huge issue, the point is that for the most part people aren't evil and they're just doing what they think is best for their families. So like from the human rights perspective, how can you approach that situation to enact positive change instead of passing judgment?
Hi, I really loved it, and I was really taken with the scenes in particular between the two sisters, and I was wondering if you could talk about how you directed sort of non-actors and sort of the more emotional moments of the film that I thought were very sort of painful and simple and honest.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, it started in the writing, but like Alexi was really helpful at giving me little things to say to them, or situations to set them up in that I might not have thought of. Yeah, like say have her just doing each other's hair. Yeah, I wouldn't have really thought to do that. Like it was. I think that it was a really great exercise as a director because there was no room to like get cerebral about it or talk about intentions or this and that. It was just, especially because she was 11 years old. It was like really, she was not used to being in such an intense situation. So it was like, I had to give just very clear, playable actions to her, and I think that was a big help. And so that was that. And like the pre-discussion, I would try to be just as totally simple as possible in terms of what I wanted her to do. So it was like, try to make your sister laugh. And I'd only say that, just like, leave it at that. And then let the older sister guide the conversation so it would hit the plot points that it needed to hit. And beyond that, it was just a matter of working with my DP to plan in advance the coverage we wanted to only do 2 takes, like maximum, and then just giving them the space to run with it. And usually it worked out.
Yes, this was obviously a Muslim village. Have you had any experience in non-Muslim villages? I mean, the same rules apply, multiple marriages, multiple wives, early marriages?
I personally, I haven't had personal experience in any non-Muslim villages. There's a diversity of religions, even in Senegal alone, but it's interesting because there's the Muslim religion, but then there's also the local traditions of this ethnic group, of the Fulani ethnic group, and their Fular, like villages throughout Africa. And it's always an interesting blend of you don't know what are religious rules, what are tradition rules. So I think it's just a combination. So I couldn't even really say whether it's the religion or what. But this particular ethnic group is known for being extremely traditional and conservative, and also closed off to outsiders. Like this is not, it's sort of lost on audiences outside of West Africa, but people are often very shocked to see this film because people in Dakar, for instance, are only used to seeing women with the tattooed faces, like as maids who don't talk, basically. So it's very shocking to see this film for them.
So I thought it was really interesting how it was like I had a lot of conflicting feelings, because I did feel like this was a very non-judgmental look at how things just are some places, and they are totally within their rights to come to those conclusions based on their history. But also the conflict on this was this tradition. Like it was a human rights issue without being treated as like this devastating event that was happening to these people, and it has been as such. It was just kind of the way things are. And I was interested in your actors' attitudes towards this thing. The way that the father played it was really like he delivered his lines with such assurance and conviction that I was wondering what his actual thoughts about the situation were, and the elder and the sisters as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because we played at like a lot of regular film festivals, like the ones that we talked about earlier. But we mostly played now like at the Human Rights Watch film festivals. They have them like all over, and we really formed a great partnership with them, because I feel like so many people who do end up making a film about forced marriage, for instance, they enter into the situation with an agenda to make a film about fixing this problem. Whereas for me, I was just like, again, if it had been about something else, that's what the movie would have been about. I wasn't making a film about early marriage, as far as I'm concerned. It's a film about their experience, and I think that's what makes it an interesting human rights piece, I think, like ultimately, because it's about understanding rather than judging. So there's that. But then generally everyone I was working with was pretty progressive to even be working on this project, like putting themselves out there like that.
The elder though,
he was
in a different case?
No, I mean he acted in the film. Like there were other adjacent villages where I wasn't known as much, and people would be like looking and they say, "Oh, Jeremy, don't worry about them. They don't understand what we're doing." So.
But also interesting is that the woman who plays Kumba has since chosen to drop out of school and get married. So
Oh yeah. Well, hopefully she'll finish. She has 1 year left, and I think she's going to finish as of my last conversation with her. But who knows? She just had a kid. But that was really interesting because there's such a pressure to be like everybody else. I think this was like my personal connection with it too. Like you leave home to go to school, you don't fit in at school, and you come back home, but you don't fit in there anymore because you've been to school. So like, where do you fit in? And you live in a place where everyone's getting married, because that's the normal thing to do. So if you're 17 and you don't have 3 children already, you're like, it's like an alien or something. So like, how comforting must it be to be married like everybody else? So that's another interesting thing.
I just wanted to say that I found the film absolutely beautiful in every way. The cinematography, the music, the cows, and they were just beautiful. Where are you taking this film from here? Where does it go? I mean, I can see this as a mainstream, going out to a large audience. Do you have any plans for that?
You'll be able to see it on Netflix by January. So there's that. But what's more exciting as well is that Human Rights Watch and I they're taking it on a cross-country tour, and we've also got a great partnership with this other large organization called Girls Not Brides, and they are doing a lot of screenings of it. We're going to have an educational version going online with like a whole curriculum that teachers can buy. So that's the plan.
After they finish high school, is there an economy where they can actually use that education, especially the girls?
That's the challenge. I mean, they have to. I mean, it's hard for anyone now to find good work, especially girls. So I don't think I really also know enough to answer your question.
When they went looking for a husband, when the father did,
Did he go to a different village or the same one?
You would go to different villages.
Did the dad work at all?
See, this is the dad wouldn't. For instance, he would never watch the cows. He would sooner. I don't know. It would be very shameful for a father to watch his own cows. What he would be doing would be like out in the marketplace every day, hanging out with the other heads of family. That's basically that.
They showed the two young men who were husbands. What did they do?
Yeah, since they're young, they would be shepherds as well, just starting as shepherds. Often, like what they actually do is, like, for several weeks at a time, they'll go out with their herd to like remote places, and then come back for a couple of days, and then leave again.
So it seemed like your role as a director, you would have a lot of trust. Because you kind of had a script, right? And then you had non-actors. And then you said when you went back to America, like you didn't know what you had until you got back and started having it translated. Like, how much anxiety did you feel as a director? Just letting it go?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. Is firstly, I think my role as the director of this film is different than maybe what it would be on the next one, or in a more just a regular narrative film, because I just wanted to, again, be as transparent as possible and just I felt my job was to put you in their shoes, and that's that. Like, without any sensationalism, pretty much. So, I mean, there was trust from me to them. There was also trust from them to me. Like, you couldn't just waltz into a village and do this. Like, especially a village like this, a Fulani village. We knew each other for like 2 years before we even really started talking about this, and it was almost a year and a half before even early marriage came up, like, at all. So there's that element of it. But yeah, I mean, everyone was on the same page. We like performed the whole movie like a play the first day. Like, everyone knew what was up. So it wasn't me, the puppeteer, exactly. It was everyone together. So when I say I didn't know if we would, I mean, I didn't know like how the words would be struck together, or I guess I also didn't know if I was 100% understood all the time in my direction, and that's what I meant when like I discovered the film. Some scenes like didn't quite work the way that they ended up performing, but other times they would say these things that that totally surprised me. And also, what surprised me was the way that they performed. It was like almost like classical in a way, because they would narrate. It wasn't like this really verite acting that that you see in a lot of films. They would almost like announce themselves and stuff, which I thought was kind of cool. So I enjoyed that it was really their way of doing things, and it's been great because a lot of times, like, there have been some reviews, for instance, that have trouble with that, but other times, most of the time, people are really into it, especially people from that area.
We have one more question.
I'll ask one more. Okay. I don't have a question. I wanted to compliment you because I see a very universalness in this film. That this is happening in many places, in many communities in the world. These traditions are changing, the cultures, and all the aspects are good. And that really came across to me. It brought back a lot of my own experiences. And there's more to it than just the marriage issue here. And I think that's the real strength of the film. That whole universalness of what's happening to people in the world. And I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you. Yeah. It was all about empathy to me and not pity.
Thank you.
Will you just talk a little bit more about the music, the process doing the music? I saw a guy's name up there who presumably wrote the score, but then a couple of different kora players as well.
Yes, I thought you might ask that.
Yeah.
So the way we did the music was it started with, when I was there were a bunch of local musicians, like kora. The kora is this West African harp, really cool. All the music is totally original music. So what we first did was I rounded up a couple local musical groups. Like there were 2 different like singer kora player guys, and we paid them, and then just with the boom and our Zoom recorder, just recorded them playing for like 45 minutes. I would give them some direction sometimes, play something sad, play something exciting, but not knowing how we would use it. So there was 2 kora players, then like there was a group of guys who would sing and play like the hand drums. So there's some singing in there. So that was all just with the boom and recording it. So it was we had like 2 hours of just raw music, which like Sophie, the editor, who also had a teacher, who saw yesterday, she and I would just use it as our temp score. And then I connected with Jay, composer, and he listened to all of that, absorbed it like a sponge. Obviously some of it is still in, but with pretty much, I gave him like a palette of instruments, so we just used that raw vocal music as